Okay, we are recording. Okay.
Good.
Everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. A little bit of a different video for this channel. Instead of me blathering about Hebrew, something much more interesting. There is a new book on the Psalms coming out called Living Without Fear by Kirsten Birkett, a friend and former colleague of mine, and she has graciously agreed to talk with me about it. Can I say with all modesty that I do read a lot in the Psalms, and I've taught them, lost track of the amount of times I've taught them, and I do read a lot, and this is genuinely one of my favorite books on the Psalms. It was good for my soul to read, and I'm going to be telling my classes about it frequently. And so I wanted to interview you briefly, Kirsty, and give you a chance to talk about it. Before we begin, can you just, tell everyone who doesn't know you who you are, where you live, what you do?
Okay, I came to the UK in 2005 to be a lecturer at Oak Hill College. I was teaching various things in Sydney before then. And I taught initially in pastoral care and counselling, but then moved on to doctrine, church history, and specifically philosophy and ethics, both of which are part of or very closely connected to doctrine, I think, as a Christian. Yeah, and so I did that until 2019 when I left college to go into church ministry, which turned out to be monumentally bad timing. Because of course with lockdown, as with a lot of churches, the budget suffered and they were unable to keep me on. So I now live in the north of England. I'm doing freelance editing. I work one day a week for the Church Society, and now, an unexpected blessing, I have time to write. Very good.
It's weird how the main things that I do as an academic, it's so easy for them to get squeezed out, and it's always nice when I have time to do that. Well, I'm very, very glad. Do you have other books that have come out recently or will come out soon? I believe you do. I
do, yes. So I just shifted rooms because of the network, so I don't know if I actually have them next to me. I wrote a book about journaling, the art of Christian journaling, which came out with Christian Focus a few months ago. And it is called Imperfect Reflections, the Art of Christian Journaling. Yeah,
that is wonderful. Yeah, I ordered a copy of that for Oak Hill Library. Not many books on that topic, but really important. Perhaps at some other point we can talk about that. Okay. I'd really like to get to this, though. I'll be saying this more than once in more than one way, but I don't want to use the word simple. There was an immediacy with which you wrote this book. There was nothing complicated or difficult to understand. You got right to the point of the text. I found it so pastorally helpful because you'd be talking about individual psalms, and I'd be reading the psalm thinking, okay, I think I know what that is. And by the end of whatever chapter you were writing about, it's one psalm per chapter, I'd be looking at the psalm saying, like, there's nothing new on the page, but I see that better. Like, it's gone into me in a new way. It's like when I just read scripture quickly, it's like a rock skip, when you skip rocks over a lake, I just kind of bounce on the surface. And at the end of each chapter, I had this continual experience of coming back and seeing the words. And you hadn't done anything complicated. You just brought me back to the text itself. But I felt like you brought me back very deeply into the text. There are not many books that do that. Is that something about what you were trying to accomplish through this book?
Oh, absolutely. It's been, I guess, a goal and an interest of mine, personally, spiritually, as well as with other people for years now. How do you go from the head to the heart? I know with myself things that I've known to be true for 30 years, but how do I actually make them impact my heart? And I guess as teaching pastoral care, as well as how that interacts with doctrine, it's how do we actually change our hearts so that we have the desires of God? Because of course, disordered desires are one of the main pastoral problems, or cause all sorts of pastoral problems. But how do we actually fix that?
Yeah.
And so that's part of what's coming through in this book. As it's a very long-term project of ways of actually getting the scriptures to impact my heart, first of all, and then hopefully anyone else I can help with that as well.
Yeah, maybe that is the question. Would you feel comfortable saying that is the question in pastoral counseling? And, I mean, I've been a Christian since I was 13. For so many years, I knew what the right thing was. It wasn't trickling down exactly as you said.
Yes,
It
yes.
it's okay. My guess would be that this book was written relatively quickly, but it comes out of you spending decades in the Psalms.
Yeah,
Is my guess correct, or?
I think that is true. Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. Early on in my Christian life, I used to wonder, what's the point of the Psalms?
No.
Because when I first became a Christian, I was all about the doctrine. I thought Romans, yep, that's what Scripture should be. Yes, logically,
Yeah.
know what the case is, what we're meant to believe. Full stop. So why have it in poetry, which is just kind of awkward? It doesn't get to the point. What's it doing? And it's a long-term process of realizing that actually the Psalms, there's a reason they're the heart of Scripture.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
and it is because it's the relationship with God that matters. And of course, that relationship has, you have to know what that is.
Yeah.
There are a lot of boundaries to the knowledge of what's true about God. That's crucial. But it's there for the sake of the relationship and not the other way around.
Yeah. That what you just said is true of every book in Scripture, but of the Psalms in particular. They just lead us by the hand and give us the words to say. When I taught Psalms last semester on was one of those frequent experiences of prepping a lecture and thinking, oh, this will take 5 minutes, and it took 45 minutes, at least.
Yes.
But I on the first day I said, whether you're familiar with the Psalms or not, whether you feel friendly with them or not, whether they're mysterious to you or not, you can probably learn everything I'm going to say in this class just by praying them out loud 100 or 150 times or so, not 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
I was watching an interview with the actor Anthony Hopkins, and he said when he has to perform a Shakespearean play, he reads it out loud 150 times.
Wow.
And then he just has it. He has the play. And my experience has been, only minority of Psalms this is true for. I pray them out. I remember once I was facing a difficult thing, and I prayed Psalm 121 out loud 4 or 5 times a day, and I felt like it got through, it penetrated. It went from here down to here. And there's just, tell me if this is your experience as well. There's something about the words themselves. They are really good counselors. They go to work on the whole person. In a way that Romans does do that, but maybe not quite in the same way. Does this sound on target to you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's interesting you talked about praying them out loud. The fact is we are embodied, using these senses matters.
Yeah.
And it does affect us. And it's how God does work in us to transform our hearts. Yeah, that's no accident.
Yeah, the language itself, sometimes it feels like the feelings to me in Psalm 130. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning. The rhythm of the words feels to me like what it feels like to wait, like you're waiting as you say it. Anyway.
Yeah.
What I admire about your book is it's just so easy to follow. Short chapters, just so pastorally helpful. But my impression is there's a very deep interaction with the Psalms that's been going over for decades. So I'm glad I was right about that guess. Who in particular did you write this book for?
It was based on a series of Bible studies I wrote. So and I've published the Bible studies. It's the same title, Living Without Fear, but then workbook.
Yeah.
So they're available too. But the Bible studies actually came first. I wrote them for my church at the start of lockdown, when a lot of people were feeling unprecedented anxiety and fear because suddenly the world had changed and we so clearly weren't in control anymore.
Yeah.
So they were written specifically with that aim in mind. But it was very easy to do so, precisely because I realized that's what so many of the Psalms do. They directly address our fears, and they address them firstly by being honest about them, by saying this is real. We're not just pretending that the world isn't a bad place. There is reason to have fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
But then what so many of the Psalms do, they deliberately turn to God and remind us of who God is, what he has done, just how much he loves us.
Yeah.
And go through the reasons we have to focus on something different.
Yeah.
So while the things that made us initially afraid are still there, it's something else that is so overwhelming that the reasons we have for joy are far greater than the reasons we have for anxiety.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to bring out in the studies, and then it just seemed to flow out quite easily in the chapters. Because that is what I had become convinced of in studying the Psalms themselves.
And you had been ministering that and living that yourself. So each chapter focuses on an individual psalm and some aspect of worry, like, forsaken by God or getting sick or getting old or something like that.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite chapter yourself?
Oh, the one I finished on, which was 32, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah, where it just seemed to bring everything else together, precisely because it's about God's promises of salvation, which is the central part of our reasons for joy. That just really affected me.
I wish I had more capacity to sort of, puncture isn't the right word. It's like breaking the sound barrier, where it's like, there are plenty of Psalms I can tell you what it means.
Yeah.
But where it's actually real, I spent enough time with it, it's actually really hit me. 142 happened for that. Like the last little bit of laments before we get the beautiful, new heavens and new kind of revelation ending. I never really known what to do. Like, I could tell you about what they mean, but they were just always sort of foreign and distant. And I was reading through the Psalms, and 142, it's like, oh, I can see it. Why was I saying that? I can't remember. It's a Tuesday afternoon, and brain fog setting in. One of the things, to go back just a little bit to something you said, you talked about how the way the Psalms interrogate our fears just aren't just instantly dispelled, and everything is fine. There's no prosperity gospel there. One of the things that so helped me with Psalm 23 is he says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." They're still there, and they're dangerous. And frequently with Psalm 62 is another example where the problem is still there, but it looks different because of how David has preached to himself.
Yeah.
This book, I don't think you have any footnotes or cite any other sources, but I think your study and academic interest is definitely informing it.
Yeah.
Is there some cognitive psychology in the background here that's helping inform how you talk or other things?
I think inevitably. I suffered badly from depression in my teen years and 20s. And so I received counseling, not until I was around 30, because I wasn't properly diagnosed, didn't realize that sort of thing. But the counseling I received then, it was secular cognitive behavioral therapy, which I found hugely helpful. Just gave me a new perspective on emotions and how they function. And so that is in the background of a lot of my thinking. I mean, it was later on that I discovered Christian counseling, basically, and realizing that there's a lot more you can do than just cognitive behavioral therapy. But nonetheless, it has a very true insight, that is that emotions are very cognitive, which is something that psychology, I think you'll find most of modern psychology is going there now, whereas previously, last century and the century before, there was much more of a view of emotions as being uncontrollable, not cognitive really, just basically irrational.
Yeah.
And so, there's not a lot of point in trying to affect your thoughts because they're not really connected to the emotions anyway, which the Bible never held.
Yeah.
The Bible is all about speaking truth, and the truth sets you free. The truth transforms you.
Yeah.
So that's something that works very easily into understanding the Psalms, I think, which are all about preaching to the self. It's preaching truth to the self. It's doing it in particular ways, as we've already said, so that that truth becomes particularly penetrating and effective. But it certainly is cognitive. It's a cognitive process that you go through.
Of talking to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Just for those who might not know, what's a one sentence down and dirty definition of cognitive therapy?
What you say to yourself affects how you feel.
Okay.
So change what you say to yourself, and then you'll change what you feel. Right,
because we're always talking to ourselves, right? A friend of mine helped just in Psalm 1, his meditation is on the law of the Lord. A friend of mine pointed consciousness is intentional. That's the fancy way to say it. But I'm almost always, there's this internal conversation going on. I'm meditating on something. I'm chewing on something. With me, it's usually something I'm worried about. What fascinates me about all this and what you're saying, I think it's there in your book, but it's the very texture of the words themselves. That they're really good at slipping past my defenses and themselves being counselors. And even the rhythm of the language sometimes, it feels like that kind of half-cut. The very words themselves are really good at hijacking my own internal conversation and challenging assumptions or fears, as you're saying, as you bring out in the chapters. Did you learn anything as you wrote this book? I've never been able to find this quote, but apparently Augustine once said, I write in order to learn. I don't have my thoughts completely together and then I write them down. As I'm writing, I'm learning. Did that happen to you as you?
It always does. That's basically why I write. I'm always writing to myself.
Right.
I know writing theory says you've got to have the person in mind that's your ideal audience. I can never do that because I'm basically writing to myself.
Right.
I'm convincing myself as I write, and which is why I find it such an enjoyable experience. Hard to get started. I mean, it's still always a chore to get started, but it's usually quite a joyful thing to do as I get going.
Yeah.
Particularly on this sort of topic. It helps me as I write as well.
Oh, of course, on the Psalms of all things, but there's a kind of catharsis there and getting something out that needs to come out.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like people to know about Living Without Fear? If you're watching, I will put a link to Amazon because you can, below in the description, so you can buy it. Is there anything else that's important about you to this book that you would like people to know?
I just really hope people buy it and read it. I find it hard to describe exactly why I think it's going to be helpful. You know, it's another book on the Psalms. Lots of people write on the Psalms, but I did write it specifically for that reason. I want people to be able to take truth to their hearts, that it's transformative. Also, just a little technical thing, please write a review. That's just the way books work these days. The whole system works on Amazon reviews.
And I think actually liking other reviews helps the formula the computer has to kick the book more easily and more frequently. So please, everyone, do that. And Kirsty, I assume without cutting too much into your writing time, you'd be available to speak in churches and continue to speak about your work on the Psalms here?
Certainly can. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I will perhaps try to put some contact information in the description for this video, so you can be gotten hold of. Again, Living Without Fear by Kirsten Birkett. I hope I can say this with modesty, but I hope my opinion counts for something because I have read a lot on the Psalms and there is so much written, and your book really stands out. So thank you for serving the church. My wife and I both read it. We were both really helped. Thank you for your efforts in that. It's just really worth reading.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.